Okay, so a really warm welcome to everybody to this speaker event run by the Mindfulness in Schools project. My name is Faiy Rushton. I'm the Executive Director of Mindfulness in Schools, and I'm really lucky this evening to be joined by Nicci Trounson. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background information on Nicci before we really get into the discussion. We're going to have time at the end for question and answer, so if you have any questions, if you could send them to MiSP Eleanor Brown. So there's a way to kind of send those questions directly to Eleanor, and she will feed them through to me so that I can ask the questions of Nicci later on. So just so you're aware of the process for that. And feel free to send those through to Eleanor through the discussion because she won't send them on until we need them. Okay. So a really warm welcome to Nicci. As I said before, Nicci is a mindfulness and wellbeing teacher at Brown School, which is a specialist setting for neurodivergent learners. With over 25 years of experience working with young people and a decade specifically in SEN primary education, she is trained in the Mindfulness in Schools project curricula. She brings together mindfulness, emotional literacy, therapeutic play to create inclusive, emotionally safe learning environments. Nicci also holds postgraduate qualifications in therapeutic play and teaching. She's currently completing a master's in teaching mindfulness at Bangor University. Her approach is informed by both lived and professional insight, including work with the Sunrise approach to autism, therapeutic interventions and support work in domestic abuse refugees in both the UK and the US. Just extraordinary background that you have there that really feeds into all of the work that you do. So incredible to just even read that out. I wonder if we could start then with perhaps you just painting a picture of the sorts of learners that you work with, maybe their age range, the sorts of needs or EHCP provisions that are most common in your setting.
Yeah, thanks, Faiy. It's lovely to be here. I haven't done an event like this before, so I've been really looking forward to it. So nice to see everyone. Thanks for everyone for coming and joining. I'm hoping, my intention is I've got some useful things to say. So yeah, so thank you. So we are a school in the Kent countryside and we have 98 pupils with specific learning difficulties. And so co-occurring conditions such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, which is a coordination challenge, and dyscalculia. So a real mix of neurodiverse needs, pupils aged 11 to 18. And we have small class sizes up to sort of a maximum of 12, sometimes down to 7 or 8. And we have lessons of about 40 minutes, 6 lessons, 40 minutes a day. And we have specialist access on site. So we have occupational therapy and speech and language and a clinical psychologist. We don't have an on-site educational psychology, but we access that externally. And we may obviously interact with external agencies to support the pupils that we have. And we adapt the curriculum. We offer cognitive skills lessons, which I think are quite unique, which address the executive functioning difficulties that our pupils have. So that's a term really used to talk about working memory challenges, processing, planning, all the things that will cause a lot of stress and vulnerability in learning and approaching learning. So that sort of fills a space to help children with strategies to reduce stress. So, and then we offer mindfulness, which is me, and that will target obviously and strengthen all of the other interventions that are going along around emotional and social needs, and it's woven through. Yeah, so that's where I'm at the moment. So, and that's where we are.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks for sharing that. I'm curious to know, because I know that in discussions that we've had before, you've talked specifically about how mindfulness can kind of meet some of the criteria that are indicated on the EHCP plan. And before we get to that, which we're going to discuss later on, perhaps if you wouldn't mind just outlining what some of those just specifically those things. We've got those in mind for when we come to mindfulness, discussing mindfulness support later.
Yeah. So that could be really all of the areas of an EHCP. Mindfulness is really coming for me into the fore of tapping into specific areas. So it would be definitely obviously around the emotional regulation, social interaction, social communication, the speech and language used around the school in different subjects as well. So it's whole school support really. And just curriculum access, and it will be many and the small group sessions will certainly be in an EHCP for social communication. So it's we can really unpick. There's so many areas of the MiSP curriculums that really tie in, and I know MiSP have done a great job with mapping their curriculums to personal social health education curriculums which are in schools, and there's definitely huge benefit to look at how the curriculums also weave into the occupational therapy, the speech and language, and the psychology support that we offer. So
Thinking that's just given me an idea for another project.
Always giving you work.
Let's map it. Lovely, thank you.
Thanks,
so I know this might sound like a really obvious thing to ask, but why does inclusion in education matter so much? And the difference, how does that show up differently in mainstream compared to in specialist provision?
Inclusion, so to include and be part of something, I mean, that's important. It's just so important, isn't it, to feel that we belong, and as a child growing up, that you belong to part of a community. And also, for me, school inclusion is about accessibility to an educational input and developmentally appropriate and in the best interest of a child. So and it also actually is really important for the families and the parents, that inclusion has to be a part of the package when we're supporting and offering education to young people, that inclusion includes the carers and parents and the wider community. So it's it's at the heart really of supporting young people, so that everybody has access to developmental education. So it's a human right, really. It's not a luxury. And I think when I think about inclusion, I think about core human needs. So the need for safety, the kind of, if that need isn't met for young people, then the opposite fear would be, the fear that would be for the need would be, that they feel threatened or they may be humiliated. So our, role is to meet safety, which is a real strong prerequisite for learning, and belonging, the need to belong for well-being and mental health, and a fear associated with not belonging is fear that you're going to be rejected, which happens to a lot of young people, unfortunately, and children, especially vulnerable children. And another need for capability and competence, so accessing through their own efforts, and that's supported, so they don't become, the fear of failure and being disaffected can come in. So in inclusion, we're considering these human needs, and I think one of the really prominent ones is the need for autonomy, the need for some agency and choice in how a young person accesses and meets, joins in with a learning activity, that they have an element of choice, because there's a huge fear of loss of control, especially for neurodivergent and vulnerable young people. So I'll probably revisit this theme of autonomy, because we're expecting young people to be part of a system that has been sort of predetermined and is quite authoritative in a lot of ways. So how do we work with actually creating space for these needs, the safety, belonging, competency, capability, meeting them where they're at, which is very much at the heart of how I work and the themes that I've worked with on different trainings that I've had.
Yeah, and I can really sort of, as I'm listening, I can sort of, especially around choice within sort of mindfulness practice, how important that is in relation to that sense of autonomy, agency, actually feeling that you're able to kind of choose the things that are right for you really matters, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, yeah.
So, when you're working with children, young people, what sorts of signs do you have where they might not feel included or not feel like their needs are being supported? I mean, I know from the work that you're doing, obviously, you're doing a wonderful job, but I'm just wondering, kind of like maybe at the beginning of this work, or times where you've got a new student and you're just beginning to get to grips with kind of what's going on for them. What sort of things pop up that show you that there's issues there around inclusion?
Yeah, it's a daily event every day dealing with signs of stress in young people and children, even in an environment that is low arousal and low anxiety, and we've got resource and fortunate. There's this an inherent level of stress, and if we look at the definition of stress, it's it's the where the perceived demands, so what we feel we've got to cope with are too much for what we feel we have internally to deal with the situation, or the external resources we've got around us, so the people around us to support us. So if you think about a stress response in terms of is a child included, so internal resources would include, your executive functioning. If you're in a classroom, that's a resource you need. You need to be able to sort of look at what the work, maybe it's a worksheet or whatever it is, and approach it. So vulnerable children already are at a disadvantage. So that's a key element of problems with executive functioning, and around communication. So they're already, again, some children unable or too nervous or to communicate. So they already have a vulnerability and with self-esteem. So that will all be impacting already an initial level of stress. So then when you think about then the child's thinking, have they got support? Well, some children do. They have a one-to-one, so that might reduce stress. But if they don't, then there's another stressor. So um, these will bring in the fight, flight, freeze responses of the nervous system. So then the behaviours would be conflict, aggression, tones of voice, more overt. So dysregulation, refusals, requests to leave the room, and it's all stress responses really. And more subtle would be masking, freezing, head down, not talking. Those kind of things where you're looking and observing how's the child doing with the expectation of the session or lesson that you have. So yeah, that we learn about in mindfulness, don't we? The window of tolerance. So how are they in that, or are they hyper aroused, or they've gone into a shutdown? So there's some kind of signs. Yeah. And
Mm.
it's a responsibility to look for, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of just that active, proactive, I suppose, way of meeting them where they are that really matters when it comes to working with young people with SEND. Yeah. Um, so I know that you've been on, just as I sort of gave your introduction at the beginning, you've been on quite a journey to sort of bring yourself to this point where you've been introducing mindfulness and well-being sort of work with the young people that you're working with. Could you just give us a little bit around kind of what your influences were, what brought you to mindfulness in the work that you're currently doing?
Of course, yeah. So back in the day, in my 20s, pre-internet, I found myself, well, I studied psychology and health. That was kind of my background, and I'd done some work with young people. But I was fortunate to be living in America at the time, and a job opportunity came to my notice. That was actually in a domestic abuse organisation in a refuge, had several sort of chalet bungalows supporting it was women and children at the time. and the job was outreach work, child support work within the refuge. And I hadn't even heard of refuges. It was very sort of, we were quite sheltered in a way with pre-internet. So it was opening up a whole new kind of area of sort of, vulnerability. And I learned a lot about behaviours that can be attributed to those kind of challenges. So I would, develop some programs going out in the community. My remit was to look at emotional kind of advocacy, safety prevention. So I would go to different settings, preschools, schools, after school, youth groups, and just kind of really self-taught myself, and read all around kind of, it was kind of a little bit of early mindfulness, but without the skills that I have now. But I used to do a little bit of breathing with the children, and work with language and things like that. So um, I think the trauma, working with people that have experienced a lot of trauma, that's where the safety kind of element to how I work with it comes from, really. And I realise that that's really, safety is kind of underpinning everything for people. So and then I taught, I then returned to England and I trained as an academic primary teacher, and it had an early years focus, the course. It was at Exeter. It was a really great course, and it was that sort of learning through play because of the early years focus that really sort of opened up for me the value of that kind of those methods. And it's very creative, and I'm really creative. I love creativity. So, and I did some work at that time with youths who were out of school. So that opened up that kind of connection with, basically children that weren't accessing education. I did some work in schools, but the next job, longer term job I took was with another refuge in Surrey. And in my salary was funded by the Pudsey Bear money raised. So this is amazing where it goes, really. And we were supporting 9 women and their children, up to sort of 24 children in the refuge. And there was sort of educational programs going on in a way, and support. And I was placing children in schools that were completely out of area. And I wanted to offer them more than just play sessions. So I trained in the therapeutic play with Play Therapy UK, which gave me a whole line of kind of understanding of child development, attachment issues. And I introduced therapeutic play to the refuge. And at a similar time, I trained with they're American in origin, the Sunrise program. It's a treatment centre of America. They were offering trainings in London, and I attended some of their advanced training in play techniques that work with bringing children on. They put aside the cognitive academic side of a child's journey, if you like, and they focus on the challenges, particularly around neurodiverse children. So it would be, and I actually just grabbed this before I came on, so something like a play to grow type approach. And the areas you would be looking at would be communication, interactive attention span, and flexibility, because there's a lot of rigidity around how a child can work. So it's bringing really intentional intervention to bring on and overcome some of the challenges associated with autism, which is in it is amazing training and very proactive and again creative. And then those sorts of combinations of knowing all of the academic curriculum that children are exposed to, the social and emotional side led me into special needs education. It was a natural sort of progression, really. And I was lucky enough to be offered the lead junior teaching position at the school, and I took on a class. We had 2 classrooms to work with 16 key stage 2 children, all neurodiverse learners. And it was really incredible to work, to have the privilege, really, of, I was following the national curriculum, but being able to go to reception level, year 1, year 2, and then what I could bespoke it. And I had 3 or 4 support assistants, so it was 1 adult to 4 children ratio. So I was following the national curriculum, but I could literally, that group are working around this area, this here, this is how they access it. So it's it was a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of what we call creating multi-sensory resources. So things that they can learn in different ways because of their learning difficulties. And it would be, a particular dyslexic sheets where you've got the words at the bottom. So everything, I learned, it opened up a whole world of resources that support. Because even though I'd had primary school training, there was very little training from that whole year. I think we had a day on autism, and you've got so much to take in as the teacher that your lens is to deliver what your folders have got in them, and you're gonna do. So it takes a long time to kind of open up and realize, how to work with all of the different needs in a classroom. And there's so much expectation on teachers now. So yeah, so I've been working at Brown's, and about 4 years ago I resigned from the lead teacher, primary teaching, and offered I have sort of missed a piece where I had brought mindfulness pause. I trained with Pause B to bring mindfulness to the classes that I had, because I'd realised there was, even though we were doing PSHE and Golden Time and different interventions, I realised that there was something missing, but I didn't know what. And then I went to a workshop in Brighton for mindfulness in schools, and I thought this is exactly the missing piece to kind of a puzzle I'd been kind of building, really. And I thought, and I looked at the curriculum, I thought this is amazing, so much explicit but creative teaching around the challenges and the children, that would support the challenges that the children had. So again, it's about accessibility, because I had children that couldn't access a primary program, even though they're primary school age. I trained in the preschool program so that I could draw from that material. And then I extended to the secondary program, .B. And it's what we call a sort of spiraling curriculum, as I know you know, Faiy. So, I mean, a lot of school subjects are spiraling, but so you start with a thread, and it will widen and deepen the learning over time, and you're revisiting, same with maths and English, you're revisiting things. Yeah, it's just been amazing to work with these different curriculums. I mean, an example of a sort of something that goes through would be working with the breath. So noticing body sensations, working with the breath, because I used to say to children, go and take some breaths, because I'd read it, in the early days, read it on the sheet. You'd go outside and take some breaths, have a break. And they wouldn't leave the group, because the connection of the group was really important to them. And it's actually turning towards the body, and the breath is challenging, especially in terms of, trauma sensitivity. So, we can work with that, and then we can work with tools around anchoring and the breath. And then later on, it becomes noticing and understanding emotion, and then using breath in real life situations before exams or before going into a social group. When people told me she did some of the practices, and then she could go in. And so they got some tools, to support them with these curriculums. And even the thinking, the thoughts, we start off noticing thoughts. What's a thought? It's our mind, our thinking mind. And then we might think about that thoughts influence emotion, and then the skills of stepping back. And so it's really, really, really useful human being, intervention, really, for want of a better word. But yeah. So I now just teach. As I say, I resigned in the sense that I knew I wanted to specialise, and I luckily the school were really open to carrying it all on, and I shifted into a wellbeing mindfulness role. So I teach year 7, 8s and 9s, and we with the social and emotional, they come into the school. Transitioning in is really important, and then we have a sort of getting to know you, cooperation, team element to the sessions, because that's just so important in an environment. And then we have to work around, I just do a lot around the senses. So foundational, we revisit language around senses. And then I've integrated a term of growth mindset, which is kind of an unusual term. I don't know if people have heard of it, but this is I've grabbed a book this morning. But this also, I mean, if you're a teacher, I'm sure you've probably heard of it, but what I think is amazing about the growth mindset resources now is they address all the barriers that we find that children won't ask for help. You know, even superheroes need help, and mistakes and the perfectionism. So there's lots of areas that you can sort of desensitize and work with children on, and that we're all in it together. So, children can be very scared of making mistakes and lots of fears and perfections. So addressing, not just telling children about social and emotional, we do worksheets, we really work with what's at the heart of the difficulties around socializing or accessing things. So year 7s are doing that, and then they go into pause B and on to dot B. So yeah, sorry, I tried to keep it succinct, but short. But
it's a really incredible journey. I mean, really, it's amazing to kind of hear how you've now got to this place where it's your full-time job as well to support them in this way. So just brilliant, really. I wonder if I could ask you, I mean, we were talking earlier in the week about the new white paper that's come out, and obviously there's a really big emphasis around SEN and changes that are going to happen. Now, for lots of us, and there's a time frame of 2029 for all of this happening in the UK, this isn't an immediate thing. So it's kind of, well, what can we do here where we are, to kind of make a change, make a difference in our own classrooms? So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just sharing some practical everyday strategies that you would recommend for a teacher who wants to make their classroom feel more inclusive, and kind of really supporting the children where they are. What practical examples would be?
Yeah, I think sort of springboarding off of the needs that I mentioned earlier. So safety, that's a lot of that's sort of reducing overload as well, because we are creative as primary teachers usually, and rooms are, it's lovely to display children's work, but actually that's really overloading for children. So just to be mindful of, yes, if you look into your classroom, the cognitive load of looking around your classroom for a child who is needing, a reduced, visual stimulus really, and the spaces around for safety and options for different seating, visual aids with language. You can put them on every desk. It doesn't have to be just for one child. So the visuals are really important. And yeah, I mean, lots of boundaries, and I mean, this is things the teachers are doing anyway, but reassurances, but almost reminding children that they, or telling them you're not going to be asking anybody to read aloud if they don't know you, and they're in the room. Those sort of little reassurances at the beginning of, if you're in a secondary school, will just reduce anxiety. And I think the power of the greet, get to know your names and they come in, and a connection, and sort of reassuring explicitly that things are okay, because they won't necessarily know, and there'll be a level of anxiety of what to expect, knowing what's coming up, what to expect. Visual step by step on the board, which I know is quite commonplace anyway, but just saying that at the beginning of the lesson, this is what's happening in this session, and if you need to do this, you need to, and I won't be doing this, and it's okay to say pass if you don't want to join in, and the sort of safety boundaries really. So going back to that kind of belonging, relational, and obviously with teachers will differentiate work anyway. But one thing I would say in secondary school, that it would be really important to differentiate assessment, because assessment quite often is a stock assessment as you go up the year groups. So what you might not be noticing across the school is that children are doing a failing really in assessments in their eyes. They're getting papers back where they've got 12 out of 100, and it's, that's happening all the time. Over time, that's really upsetting and disaffecting. So I always think, well, assessment should be differentiated so that the child can access, feel good about how they've done and know that they've got some work, some, further learning to do. So just being mindful of things like that, is really helpful. Make them
Yeah.
want to come back again and not want to come back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is all sorts of things that we kind of know about finishing the day well is really important in terms of young people wanting to come back the next day
Yeah.
to school. So it's kind of, yeah, peak ends theory. If people haven't heard about that, go and have a look at kind of creating good experiences at the end of the day, because that will be the most memorable thing and will hopefully encourage them to come back the following day. Um, so in your experience then, when an integrated support system is working really well for children with complex needs, what does that look and feel like?
Um, so it's holistic, really, is a key word that comes up for me. So responsive and holistic. So it would have all aspects of child development considered. So physical needs, cognitive, social and emotional, language. So you've got this kind of interconnectedness of the domains of, growth, really. And we sort of evolved in education from sort of industrial eras where we were thinking we needed workforce and mass literacy, following instructions and schedules. And then we've gone sort of into a more democratic era where we're looking at citizenship and supporting individuals for society. And we opened up a bit to community participation and social responsibility. And now we've got this even more sort of modern era where we've faced a lot of challenges around technology and neuro inclusion, world events. So we need to shift really work from this sort of compliance to human connection. So an integrated system in a special needs environment that where I am that has mindfulness as well. The schools work with, there's mindfulness, as I said before, occupational therapy services, speech and language, cognitive support, which, is the ideal really to teachers can't take on all of this additional pressure. So you need lots and lots of adults and support. It's really, I often say to, if you to somebody, if you said you're going to organise a children's birthday party on Saturday afternoon and 30 children are coming and you've got to entertain them and they've all got these different needs and, you'd be thinking, oh, I need about 3 people and, this is going to take me a day to get ready. And, and this expectation that there's thousands of children arriving in school buildings with potentially one adult holding that for children, it's vastly under-resourced and has been for an extreme, amount of time. And unfortunately, I feel schools are just so huge, aren't they? And that is a sort of disservice really to especially neurodivergent people. So it's sort of quite an ableist and not really neuro-affirming as it needs to be in an integrated system. So yeah, we need to acknowledge the reality of the current system and these amazing teachers that are working within that. And then there's a burnout risk for pupils and teachers because we've sort of, all the demands of all those different subjects. And yeah, so moving from sort of this limited, sort of more rigid, sort of what some people have read described as like a sort of factory, fixed and narrow approach to the system, where we expect the child to be in there, and to moving more into an open, spacious greenhouse, acknowledging that people are like plants really. They're so different, and they need a different soil and they need different food. They grow in different ways, they look different, they think different, and we create so the flowers aren't pushed up against the wall of the greenhouse. So we create a spaciousness around how we work in education and the flexibility. And then there would be much more scope to integrate different people. And, you know, neurodivergence really as the baseline for a healthy school, not a sort of add-on. And yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, what comes to mind with integration, really. But meet human needs as early as possible, or they simply become societal problems of the future, as we know. And, you know, and yeah, so mainstream really can do more within their methods at the moment and their teaching approaches, but, you know, as I say, acknowledging the reality of the limitations that they have.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making me think about how outcome focused education can be, and how actually we really need to be exploring a little bit more what the conditions are that are needed for helping young people access learning, and it being an enjoyable thing rather than it just being kind of targets to be met.
Yeah.
I'm thinking straight away, I'm thinking about Ken Robinson's talk that he gave a long time ago now, about kind of that exactly what you've just described about putting children in, you know, like a little factory. They're on a thing, they're given all these different things, and then they're kind of scooted out at the end. Yeah, and I think a greenhouse analogy is much more appropriate for thinking about how children and young people grow and develop in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Um,
I just wondered, Faye, as it's I have been talking a lot and time, I've realised it's the 20 to 8. So, well, wonder whether we could take a little mindful moment, a little micro moment. Would that be okay?
yeah,
As just to invite everyone, it's going to be sort of just 10, literally a moment, 10 or 15 seconds, just an invitation, if you like, just to wherever you are. And thank you again for joining. But maybe just to sort of feel your feet on the floor. And just where you're sat, feeling the chair or sofa or bed where you sit, and just settling for a moment. And I'll keep an eye on the time, but literally just 10 seconds, just to, you may want to close your eyes or soften your gaze. And just bring to mind perhaps a person or the people in your life that have supported you um, to be where you are right now in your life. So whomever you're thinking about or connecting with, you know, they would be really pleased. Um, yeah, to know the difference that they've made in your life, and the way that they make you feel. So yeah, thank you for joining in with that.
thank you. Yeah, it's nice to take that moment. So we were talking at the outset about EHCPs and the different elements of them. How do you see kind of mindfulness supporting with those?
Um, so well, it would be again looking at the different areas. I think um, whatever is is coming under really regulation, and communication, and yeah, there's so much in an AHCP now. I have seen mindfulness mentioned as a recommendation for emotional support and well-being. So it would, yeah, be confidence, stress management skills come up. It strengthens and connects the impacts of the other interventions, sensory and physical regulation. So there's a really big piece for mindful culture, mindful schools. And I didn't mention when I initially trained in the Pause Bee, it's really great that you have to do an 8-week stress reduction course for yourself as a teacher. So I was there all gung ho, oh, I need this for my pupils. And actually, when I stepped back and realised, actually, I am stressed trying to meet the needs. Of course, I would be. I'm a human being, so you know it's difficult. It's a demanding position. So that really took me back to my own well-being. So yeah, so for teachers, it's fantastic as well. So it's whole school. It's the EHCP outcomes, the connection with the other interventions, and also supporting, our valuable teaching staff, which also feel perhaps like the children. They don't want to go into schools because the demands and expectations and the stress is, so challenging. So yeah, there's a huge piece for mindfulness in the future. It needs to come to for every school really. It's mindful, it needs to be a mindful
Mm.
environment for people and considerate. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And if you before we go to questions coming from our lovely group that are here this evening, just wondered if, because sometimes it can feel overwhelming, like when you're in the mainstream, for example, and you're thinking, how do I, do this? Maybe just kind of, could you offer like maybe one or two things that would be practical things that people could just take away and try out?
Yeah, I think enabling this autonomy. So try to include as much choice as you can for pupils. And it can just be a language thing, would you like to sit here or use this resource or so yeah, and this power of the greet I mentioned, relational approaches. Yeah, kind of, I think probably what I touched upon earlier, the strategies around meeting needs, and yeah, connecting with the pupils so you enjoy your job, so you don't feel. I've been in places in my career where I felt like I'm just, really trying to keep up and going into sort of almost an automatic pilot and losing some of my creativity under the weight of what I've been doing. So that's the gift of mindfulness for me as a teacher. It helped me to step back and readjust and to start enjoying, everything that I can within, an intentional joining and connection. And I think, I'm certainly, is enabled me to stay in teaching and, to try to enjoy my job, and that's, I'm a human being as well, I need to be present as much as the children. So yeah, teachers
Yeah,
are
so
important.
yeah, so important to kind of remember about the fact that it's there to support us too when we're doing what we're doing. So really, thank you so much for kind of naming that. I'm just going to go then to questions, and we have already got one here that's come through. So I'm just going to read this one out. So for a child who may potentially have ADHD, only, I think it says they're 5, so too young to diagnose. Would a school that has stricter rules on behaviour be better, or one that is more free and allows the child to be more of an individual?
So this is sort of a dilemma really for parents to thinking about. Schools do differ in some ways, but if it depends on the choice here, whether somebody's looking at the whole of the, options around special needs or mainstream options, or even different alternative like the Steiner and the Montessori, and there's so many different sort of aspects. It can be quite overwhelming for parents, but I think that picking up on the word of sort of where we talked about integration, actually it's almost an integration of those two approaches. So and it would be looking at how the child, every child's unique as well. So I think if you have a strict sort of two-bounded environment, more desk time, sitting still, assessment-based, academic, then, a child with ADHD traits could experience a lot of failure because their behaviour is what we call bottom up. It's involuntary, impulsive, and if they're given consequences for those traits, it just teaches them they're bad and causes sort of trauma really. So the benefit would be predictability. So you want a structured environment and a boundaried environment. All children need that to feel safe. And then if you went too free, the risk of that would be that would be overwhelming to a child, and it's cognitively overloading to have to figure things out. and they would struggle to self-regulate as well in a 2-3 environment, and then they could, so I think looking at the school that you're looking at, one key thing is that they understand neurodiversity. I have been at schools in the past that say we don't know much about autism. This was many years ago. We don't know much about autism here, so probably best they don't come here, and that was only 15 years ago. So, it's as a strategy as well for teachers, learn about it, know what the needs are, talk to pupils and educate pupils around what neurodiversity is, and ensure that when you're a parent going around a school that you feel that they understand, the challenges, and that they don't see your child's behaviour as, that's a bad child or a difficult child, and that they have a more open and understanding. And when you meet people that understand neurodiversity, you'll know and you'll connect, and they'll reassure you, and they'll have things, and they'll be able to tell you the things that they do to support children with those needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. So I've got another question that's come through. So one question I have for Nicci would be around the practicalities of delivering the Pawsby curriculum for her students. Does she manage to deliver one lesson in her 40-minute lesson, or does she find she needs longer to deliver each lesson? Then once she's delivered the whole curriculum, does she weave it into the ongoing curriculum at all thereafter, before they circle back to doing the dot B at a later stage? And if so, how?
I think I processed most of that.
Back to the secondary questions. Yeah. So the first one is the timing thing around.
So thank you for that. That's a great question, because trying to get a Pawsby curriculum into a mainstream, the challenges of mainstream timetables is difficult. I have the luxury of time and space. So the Pawsby programme is 12 lessons long, and I can do that over a whole academic year by offering 2 40-minute sessions a week. So that's our year 8s. So a Pawsby lesson that would be 1 hour on the curriculum, I will do for I'm doing some maths now very quickly. I don't need to do the maths, but 3 weeks, twice a week. And then it's completely looked at for language, for overlearning, for multisensory pairs games. We've just got the whole kind of, I keep saying to my teaching assistant, we're nearly there, aren't we? We're nearly there. We've got everything. And then we start again and we go, well, wouldn't it be great if we did? She just looks at me now. But she actually does really enjoy creating things. But so I have that privilege to be able to do that. So and then there was something about it taking it on.
Well, is there, I'm wondering then, if you break it down like that, is there then time afterwards to kind of weave it through the rest of the curriculum before they get to a point where they learn dot B in year 9?
So you mean the rest of the curriculum out into the school?
Yeah.
Moving it out. Well, it's actually kind of shifted actually. When I did start doing Pawsby initially with year 7, and then I recognised with the children that we had coming in that they needed a foundational year before starting Pawsby. So at the moment, I don't have a dot B group. I'm just with Pawsby, but it's difficult to bring it into year 10. I would prefer to leave it another year to settle and bring it in year 10, but then we have the timetable demands then with coming up to qualifications and exams. So what I did do for one group is I brought it in our morning occupational therapy sessions. So I didn't mention, I think when I talked about the provision, that we have whole school 20-minute OT every morning, and that's where it can be touch typing, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, and mindfulness was put in as coming in there. So I don't know if that quite answers the question, but I do feel that there needs to be a settling between the pause, because Pawsby is a primary intervention. So they would have a period of time before they went to the dot B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I think that answers that question.
Mm.
There is another question here. I'm looking at the time, and it might be that this is the last question. But just to say that if you have got other questions, we will pass them to Nicci and see if we can get a response and send them back to you in some way, shape, or form. So just to say that. But let me just go to this next question that's here. In your view, what practical steps should mainstream schools take to make exam environments more accessible and less stressful for neurodiverse pupils? What changes are needed to support a child's mental health and feelings of worth, not feeling failure and panic?
Well, that's a really big one, isn't it? It's yeah. Um I think that's a really hard question to answer because that's the reality is um yeah, I sort of it's almost stumped me in a way. Um, I think I would need to reflect on that. I mean, there's different areas. I mean, I don't know, the person asking the question is aware that, you can have other spaces to take exams and request quiet spaces. So there are adaptations around taking exams. Um, and I think reducing demand in terms of overwhelm, I think schools should be offering flexibility around the number of GCSEs that pupils are expected to do. It may be that they can attend lessons, but they don't necessarily need to take an exam in a subject. And the learning is there for the child, but it may be in the best interest of the child that they're not taking 9, 10, 11 different exams that all crammed into one period of time. It's not serving our children to have this set up, and definitely in terms of mental health and at that time and their age, and people are talking about this all the time. So I think, as a parent, really supporting the child to manage that stress and to know that they have choice, coming back to the choice again and autonomy. you know they shouldn't be doing things that make them ill. Look at the boundaries, look at the level of functioning, and you can take GCSEs in different times. You can access things at different times, and we need to be really opening again this greenhouse, this space, giving children different ways to show their learning. Sorry, I might go down my whole suggestion route again, but it's a really valid question around this stress and exams. But mindfulness, again, these kind of maybe preparing, through ways of self-care, and lots of reassurance and asking and reaching out to the school and saying, we need to be supporting this young person in how they are right now. They're going to be naturally stressed. That's a natural, any assessment is stressful. Coming on a live talk may engender some stress. This is all normal, reactivity, but yeah, just keeping it on the healthy side for everyone. So, take self-care. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nicci. So we are here at the end of our talk together. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And it's kind of these sessions only work because we're very lucky to have amazing volunteer speakers who give their time freely. And so just to say, we are a charity. Nicci's given their time freely this evening for us, and thank you very much for those of you that have already made donations. But just to say shortly, there will be a slide coming up in the chat.
Not alone in my work, because I'm not alone, obviously, in my school, but that the services that you provide to support the teaching profession is phenomenal. So, and Faiy, you're holding that community, and Eleanor and your other colleagues. So, keep going. It's going to grow and come. It's what we all need, isn't it? What we're looking for and what I was looking for. So, the missing piece of the puzzle.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind of you to say and really affirming. So really lovely. Thank you.